This is the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. This show examines the latest legal topics and news facing families whose loved ones have been injured in a nursing home. It is hosted by lawyers Rob Schenk and Will Smith of Schenk Smith LLC, a personal injury law firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to the show.
Hello out there and welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rob Schenk.
And I'm Will Smith.
And we are Georgia trial lawyers, and we are also your hosts for the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Before we went to air, we were talking about with Gene who our favorite Julie Brown was from the 90s. My favorite Julie Brown was Julie Brown from Just Say Julie, the redheaded comedian. Will's favorite Julie Brown was Downtown Julie Brown from, I believe it was MTV Dance Party, and she would say "wubba wubba wubba, goodbye, God bless." That's the Julie Brown that is Will's favorite.
I 100% support that. I don't know. Yeah, okay.
I thought you were going to be mad that you got Downtown Julie Brown.
I would rather have Downtown Julie Brown than... I have no idea who that other Julie Brown is.
You don't know who Just Say Julie?
No.
Okay. Just Say Julie Brown was a comedian that had a show that was like Beavis and Butthead before Beavis and Butthead. She would have skits.
So this is something that you watched after Daria or something like that?
This is before Daria.
Okay.
Anyway, so lots of good things for the podcast today. We're going to talk about probably the central question that we get every day, because it has to do with when we're intaking potential clients, is how do nursing home abuse and neglect attorneys select what cases to take? Which is, that's the essential question that we ask ourselves every day, is which cases do we move forward with and which cases are we not able to, and what are the criteria?
We just had to take a break briefly because I had left the fan on because it's extremely hot in the dungeon.
Yeah.
But we're very...
You called it the dungeon. I thought that you hated that.
Well, no, I mean, we're really passionate about what we do. We feel bad for the family members, and we want to help them as attorneys. So it's difficult for us to turn down cases, and a lot of times, people who call us get frustrated because they call us thinking that we're going to solve their problems, and sometimes we have to tell them this is not a case we would take. Even though it's extremely relevant and important to them, it's not a case we take.
That's right. So, in other words, there's a continuum on which there's a component that we look at in terms of what harm has been done. How egregious is it? How long-lasting is it? Is it permanent, or has there been death? Because you got to think about it this way. A nursing home can do or fail to do something that causes a harm. But at the end of the day, how has that affected the life of your loved one or the resident? In some instances, you have something as simple as the staff is rude, or the staff does not call when the call button has been hit often, like there's a pattern. And while that might be, in fact, a infraction, a violation of the Bill of Rights of a resident, or even could be considered negligence in the civil sense, in the common law sense, at the end of the day, you have to ask a jury to give you something for it. So what is failure to respond to a call button a few times that didn't result in an actual injury? What is the damages to someone that, say, has dirty or long fingernails? Or what is the damages at the end of the day when the only issue has been matted or dirty hair? Those cases are true infractions or violations, but from a standpoint of what has the ultimate conclusion been, it might not be something that a law firm would afford to take.
And we also just like to keep a low number of cases because, we're not a settlement mill firm, which means that you could ask me the name of a client right now, and I can tell you everything about their case. I can even tell you everything about Rob's cases because we have a select number of cases. We don't have 1,000 nursing home cases, and we don't treat our clients just like numbers. I mean, they all have my cell phone.
That's right.
So, and I literally get calls on a daily basis from clients' families on my personal cell phone. That's why I have a limited number of cases. So that factored in with the cost and the resources it takes to do a case mean that we have to turn down a lot of cases that potentially come our way.
And that's it. Actually, it's a good point, Will. So at the end of the day, the value of a case oftentimes is directly proportionate to the effect that the injury has had on the life of the resident. So obviously the most valuable ones oftentimes are death cases because that's final. Or amputated limbs, permanent injuries are higher value than a twisted ankle, a bruise, or an abrasion. Okay, so there's a continuum in terms of the level of severity and the impact on the life of the resident.
And I just want to point out that it may seem somewhat callous that we are quantifying this type of tragedy, but what people have to understand is that is who you're coming to. If you're seeking justice from a civil attorney against a nursing home, then what you are talking about is seeking monetary award. If that's not what you're looking for, then you need to contact the Department of Community Health and make a complaint. And they might fine the nursing home or just make them take corrective action. But anytime you talk with a personal injury attorney about a wrong somebody has done to you, you are ultimately talking about how much money this is worth.
That's right. So from a 40,000 foot view, that's one of the first components that an attorney is going to look at when they're selecting a case. So that's from a broad standpoint. That's one component, is looking at the severity of the injury based on the fact that generally in courts of law, the value of the case is based on the severity of the injury.
Right.
Another component is going to be, simply how difficult will it be to link the acts or non-acts of the nursing home to the injury, which another way of saying is causation. How difficult will you be able to prove that the nursing home is the cause of the injury? And that seems easy if you think about.
Sorry.
That seems easy when you're thinking about a staff person punching a resident, or a staff person, dropping a resident.
Well,
but when
actually, I mean, then it's still a matter of trying to prove that the nursing home should have known about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's say in that example they did know about it.
Yeah.
Then the liability component is easy, but but then you have cases where perhaps a resident has developed a UTI and then sepsis, and then has passed.
So they got urosepsis, and it led to their death. Then the question is, because if you have an indwelling catheter, not to get off on a tangent here, but if you have an indwelling catheter, you're more prone to UTIs, to urinary tract infections. And so it's possible the nursing home could do everything that they should do, and you still get a UTI that still leads to urosepsis. So are they liable for that, or is it just something that was unavoidable?
Right. And so, I mean, it goes without saying that cases that would be impossible to prove generally would not be accepted by an attorney, because you still have to prove, you have to go in front of 12 jurors and prove to them by a preponderance of the evidence that this in fact happened and the nursing home was the cause. So where they can't even convince themselves, it's going to be difficult for them to take. Then you have cases on the other side that, perhaps the death certificate, perhaps, several experts, perhaps the treating physician all agree on the cause of the death or the injury, and then it might be slam dunk for an attorney to take the case, and there's everything else in the middle. So at the end of the day, if you've approached an attorney and they've declined the case, even though your loved one has been injured, consider that there's going to be one of those two components, that even though they were injured, it might not be egregious enough to warrant the cost and expense of filing a suit or making a claim, or the ability for that attorney to ultimately prove that the nursing home was the cause of the injury will be too difficult, if not impossible, and too much of a risk for the attorney to take.
And something important to understand, because I think some people would make this assumption and not understand how this works. Let's say that you spend $100,000 on a case, which is very easy to do. Trust me, doctors are expensive. Video depositions are expensive. Evidence is expensive. Demonstrations are expensive. Witnesses are expensive. Everything starts adding up and costing money. Okay? It is not the case that you can simply say, well, in addition to the special damages of all the medical bills and the general damages of the pain and suffering, we also want to be compensated for that $100,000 that we spent on all this evidence and all these doctors and all the demonstrative evidence. We also want our attorney fees. You don't get things like that in a court of law generally, unless it's a very special circumstance, because there is a genuine case or controversy here, and they have a right to defend themselves. And unless they've been abusive in their litigation or
there's been some other reason to shift the burden.
Yeah,
everybody's responsible for their own.
Everybody's
fees.
responsible for their own fees. So you got to think that if it's going to cost you, $100,000 to pursue a case, then that case has to be worth some amount of money to make it financially feasible to do that.
That's exactly right.
I mean, this is not the type of thing that you do pro bono just to seek justice, simply because it's financially impossible to do that.
Right. So if the cost of a case is $100,000, then theoretically you would want a minimum verdict to be at least $100,001, or you're losing. The attorney is losing money in that instance. So those are the two things to keep in mind if you've gone from attorney to attorney and are rejected. But what I would recommend, what I would consider for you, if you've been rejected by one attorney, is go to another attorney. And if you've been rejected, your case has been rejected by a number of attorneys, then or if you go to the first attorney to take it, I think an option that you might want to try out is to contact Adult Protective Services, contact your local ombudsman, contact the Department of Community Health, make your voice known, because just because an attorney won't take your case doesn't mean that light can't be shed on that particular nursing home by a regulatory agency whose job it is to investigate even the smallest of claims. And
although I think it's a long shot, and I generally am not a fan of taking a case for media coverage, because the media is really not interested in most cases. Go to the media. Go call, one of those investigative teams on Fox 5 or whatever, and say, hey, listen, my mom's been abused. She's been neglected, and people need to know about this nursing home.
We used to have I think his name was Turco, but in Nashville, very popular consumer investigator reporter guy, and he had his own segment, and the segment would begin. Like
Dale, Trust Dale here.
But if Trust Dale had an eye patch and was you wouldn't want to mess with him at a bar.
Yeah.
Turco would his opening segment, I think a car would be rolling and he would jump out of it and start talking to the camera. You know what I'm saying? And explosions in the background. You know what I'm saying? He's got a jar of muddy water he just took from the local pond. It's got pollution in it with the steel mill in the background. Turco. I think that's who it was. He was the ABC affiliate in Nashville, I think. It doesn't matter. But go to the media if you can.
But otherwise, what we're saying is that if people need to understand that we are but one potential remedy for a problem with a nursing
We
home.
being the personal injury attorneys.
We being personal injury attorneys. And within that, we have a very limited skill set, and we have a very limited scope of solutions that we can seek. And the solution that we seek is monetary damages. There's nothing else that we can do. We cannot have a court find that a nursing home start treating its residents better. We cannot have a court find that a nursing home be under new management. We certainly can't have a jury decide to make this never happen and bring back your loved one. The absolute, and this is essential, the only thing that we can do is make the nursing home pay money, and that's it.
That's right. And just to piggyback on that, so as we've said many, many times, the litigation process can be quite expensive, but sometimes people don't understand, like, what does the money go to? Why are attorneys having to fork out this amount of money to take something to trial? So some of the things to keep in mind are this, that evidence and proving your allegation requires either documents or testimony. Okay, those are the only things that are really going to matter at the end of the day. In order to acquire the testimony that's going to prove your allegations, you have to pay somebody that has an expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, expert witnesses that can talk to a jury, that have experience in the certain area, that can say a standard of care was breached, or this act caused this injury, things like that. And you're talking about, if attorneys that charge by the hour. I mean, I've seen those as high as like $1,200 an hour, which is amazing to me. I can't even imagine, if you can imagine what's a doctor's time worth by the hour?
Yeah. They are reluctant to be involved. They have no incentive. They have no benefit, really. This is taking them away from their ability
for treating physicians.
Yeah, for treating physicians. It's taking them away from their ability to treat their patients and look after their practice. So if you're going to bring a doctor in as an expert, you have to pay them a lot of money.
Yeah. And that's an overwhelming cost, and the reason why that costs money, it's not just having them come in for 2 or 3 hours at a trial.
Oh, no.
Oftentimes they don't come in for the trial. The issue is an expert that you're using to prove a point, not necessarily a treating physician that's put hands on a resident, but somebody that's objectively looking at everything and offering a conclusion, is that individual needs time to look at everything. Then that individual is going to be deposed, and that takes a long time to prepare. It takes a long time to go through the deposition. They might be deposed more than once. And then the other side is going to maybe have 1 or 2 experts that rebuts that person, and then maybe you have to have somebody else that rebuts that person, and then you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars at that point. So that's one component, is the expert witness fees. The other fees are simply filing the case. Can be hundreds of dollars. You're talking about thousands.
It can actually be thousands, because we have to file that expert affidavit with it too.
That's true. So even to get going, it costs you a few $1,000s. And then you have other fees that you might not think about, the fact that you have to pay a stenographer whenever you have a deposition, and you might have 10, 15, 20 depositions in the case, but you got to pay a stenographer or court reporter to come to that location and type everything down and pay for the transcript. I mean, just the paper alone might cost you $600 or $700, depending on how long. You've
got photos that you need to blow up so that the jury can see them better. You've got you may have to purchase certain medical devices so you can show an example to a jury. You may have
even medical records. Medical records. Don't get me started. Medical records. Yeah. If you want paper copies of medical records, I mean, that can be into the thousands upon thousands of dollars, depending on how much treatment there was.
Yeah.
So these are not just frivolous purchases. These are things that are essential to prove a case, but it's expensive. So that's where a lot of the cost comes from. But again, at the end of the day, you're generally, unless a particular statutes are invoked or there's some type of issue with wanton or ridiculous behavior on the other side, in the American judicial system, both sides are responsible for their own fees, even if they're victorious. Even if a plaintiff is victorious and gets an award, they cannot also ask for attorney's fees or cost of litigation generally. There must be some extraordinary cause, or there must be some statute that's been invoked in order for that to happen. It doesn't happen often. So, knowing that, you can understand many attorneys' trepidation in selecting your case or choosing to take a case. This isn't something that is done unless it's some type of pro bono office. This is not something that's done just for the heck of it or for free. It is at the end of the day, somebody has to be paid, and if the risk is too high, based on the value of the case and based on the risk of being able to or unable to prove liability, the causation component, it's not going to be worth it to the attorney because they have mortgages and food habits to support. Yes, in my case. But
so people who, non-lawyers don't understand, and it's understandable that they don't understand. You don't just walk into a courtroom and say, Judge, we'd like to present our witnesses now. There is so much planning that goes behind it, that goes into it, so much money and resources that goes behind it and into it, that it's imperative that you have to keep that in mind when you're picking a case.
That's right. And speaking of damages and awards and expenses of litigation, we have a case, a filing of a new case out in Texas. A lawsuit requesting $1 million filed against Texas nursing home. A family of a resident of Windsor Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Duval, Texas, has sued that nursing home for $1 million after an employee posted to Snapchat pictures of the resident's feces-covered face. Windsor Nursing and Rehab is accused of failing to properly supervise the employee, Carlos Alberto, age 23, who was later arrested. Pictures allegedly posted by Alberto show a person tickling the nose of the resident, prompting that resident to reach up and touch her own face with a feces-covered hand.
Well, what I'm a little confused on here, because I have Snapchat. I know that you.
I was going to ask you what Snapchat is.
So unlike Instagram or Facebook, where the video or the picture that you post is up there until you take it down, Snapchat, all of these, and if you want to know, I'm showing him Snapchat what it looks like. All of these are they're temporary, so they last for 24 hours. That's it, and then they're gone. And if you send somebody a Snapchat, like people have sent me Snapchats, if you send somebody a Snapchat, you can watch it once, maybe twice, and then it's gone. You can't see it again. So these are all temporary. So I'm curious. Things must have moved pretty quickly if the police somehow managed to find somebody that he was Snapchat friends with, and they could show him, and they could show the police the Snapchat. I'm just curious how that went down. Either way, it's absolutely disturbing.
Completely egregious. And it looks like this particular nursing home, Windsor Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, this must be a reoccurring problem, maybe with this particular employee, because the article goes on to say that that another family has had an issue with it. A couple of days ago, a family member found their loved one sitting in his bed, and he had dried feces all over him. The nurses had failed to change him, and it didn't seem like they really cared about changing him or doing anything to address the issue. According to the article, the facilities administrator, TJ Helmkamp, said that he's a man of ethics, saying that he himself, the T.J. Heldkamp, is a man of ethics, and if something like that were to happen at a building I manage, I would take every exhaustive effort to ensure the residents' safety. And
something that's important to note here is that do not make the assumption that this case is worth $1 million, because it says that a lawsuit seeking more than $1 million has been filed. That is actually, to me at least, a somewhat meaningless statement, because I can seek any amount of money I want to for any lawsuit that I want to file. So, for example, let's say that you accidentally push a shopping cart into my car and it scratches it. I can file a lawsuit seeking $1 billion for that. I'm never going to get it,
right,
and it's going to be tossed out.
That's right.
But you could see a headline that says lawsuit seeks more than $1 million for car scratch, right? So it doesn't really mean that they're getting $1 million.
It just means that they're requesting it. So in this case, the attorney will argue what is, and this is a valid argument, and one that we've made, what is the dignity of the resident worth? What is the privacy of the resident worth? And there is a monetary figure to that. Aside from this being straight up abuse, there's also, like I said, privacy issues involved. That's a HIPAA violation to video record someone without their permission and post it anywhere, let alone Snapchat for amusement.
Well, yeah, and that does bring me back to my question. I actually, just as an attorney, am curious how that affects the value of the case. I mean, if this were posted on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, it has a potential to be there for perpetuity. For Snapchat, I mean, it's there and then gone in 24 hours. How did they?
You're saying logistically, how do they get it?
Yeah, how do they get it, and what does that mean if it's only up there for a brief time?
Right. So the issue here, one of the main issues, is for this family, is going to be linking the behavior of this Carlos Alberto Santa Cruz to the nursing home. So perhaps if the nursing home didn't run a proper background check, perhaps if they don't have a policy regarding social media with their employees, they're going to be held liable through the concept of respondent superior. In other words, whatever Carlos is doing, nursing home is responsible for it, because they had either not actual knowledge or what's called constructive knowledge, or should have known what he was capable of doing or what he did do.
And that's what's important to remember here, is that we are not discussing the liability of the CNA. Okay, that's not the issue here. He is clearly he's got criminal charges pending against him. Mm-hmm. So he's in a lot of trouble. And if he had unlimited income, you could go after him and maybe get $1 million. But the issue at hand here is, to what extent is the nursing home? To what extent is this LLC that runs this nursing home? To what extent are they responsible for this?
That's right. And it looks like, according to the article, that this particular nursing home is one of the lowest scoring nursing homes in terms of quality in the entire city of Austin, in the Austin, Texas area.
And I've told you this time and time again, and not that this is necessarily a case that is just indicative of Texas, but Texas is known for being one of the worst offenders for nursing homes. And for the life of me, I have been dealing with nursing homes for 16, 17 years now, and I cannot figure out why southern rural nursing homes are the worst offenders, but they are. In our experience,
anecdotally,
true. But even statistically, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and within those places, it's some of the places way down south that are just really lacking. But I don't know. Also, speaking of lacking, we're lacking any more time to continue.
That's pretty good. We are. So, in other words, what Will is trying to say in his quaint southern drawl is that we've reached the conclusion of this episode of the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. This is a video podcast, meaning that you can either watch or listen or do both. You can watch the podcast on our YouTube channel or on our website, which is nursinghomeabusepodcast.com, or you can download the audio via MP3 on Stitcher or iTunes. Be sure to subscribe to us. New episodes of the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast every Monday. We appreciate your attention and tuning in, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, and feel free to leave us some feedback. And for more information about the topics discussed in this episode, check out the show website, nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. That's nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. See you next time.